It's a mean age. But it is gonna be a beautiful future as long as we don't f it up. I'm Brian McWilliams, and this is Mean Age Daydream, where I bring you unfiltered comedy, criticism, philosophy, and politics with a Mean Age Daydream. What's happening, chunky monkeys? What's up, buttercups? Welcome to Mean Age Daydream. I am, of course, your host, Brian McWilliams, here to lay out what's good, what's bad, what's shaken, and the latest recipes for a delicious corn chowder, which is what I made last night for dinner. Welcome to the show, everybody. If you haven't already, please do me the service of going and hitting subscribe if you're on a podcast, notify if you are on YouTube. As you've been reminded, we have many multitudes of thousands of people subscribed to our YouTube page because we have been doing this for so very long and so very well, yet none of you actually see it because you're not hitting notifications, and we are severely shadow banned, as we have been for many years. It's what happens when you're speaking the truth for so long. So remember to hit notify. Also, make sure that you're following us on Rumble. We are on Rumble, of course, as well. Otherwise, welcome to the show, guys. I titled the episode Diary of a Mad Trans Woman in honor of she or he who will not be named. I'm not going to say the name of the person who wrote a manifesto, which even calling it a manifesto seems to do it too much justice. Wrote scribbles of madness in a notebook before going on a shooting rampage in Nashville, Tennessee. If you're not familiar with this case, a school, the Covenant Catholic School, was shot up by a trans adult woman, or a, I guess, identified trans adult woman. At the time, 3 children were killed. 3 other adults were killed as well. The shooter was, as I said, trans, identified male, identified as female. This story got some attention, but predictably was kind of pushed to the side. Why? Well, because it didn't go along with the mainstream narrative, didn't go along with the mainstream concerns of most of us. And when I say mainstream, I mean the actual population. I don't mean the mainstream media. I don't mean people in academia. I don't mean people that are busy advocates for the trans activism, right? I'm talking about the rest of us, the people who are based in the world, in logic, in reason, who can ask questions such as, is it a great idea that so many young adults that are isolated, that are without a doubt imbibing way too much social media, which was shown through multiple studies, is changing the way that they think, the way they act, the way they view themselves and their health? I think a perfect example is, of course, the massive uptick in women that are young women that are now identifying as trans. I was reading numerous articles on why Sweden, why Denmark, why many countries in the European Union have completely reversed course on the way they treat people that are identifying as trans. The gender affirmation model, which of course is what the United States, which is now backwards, by the way, compared to the rest of the Western world in how we view trans people and treat them. Well, the gender affirmation seems to be based in absolutely flawed studies. The Dutch model, which is all based upon, to begin with, like the entire concept of you affirm it and then you change sex and you put, that was based on terrible studies, questionable results. And you're seeing now multiple studies that are coming out showing the opposite is true here, that these people should not be simply affirmed, that they should not be dosed with hormones at a young age, that the impact of social media, as I'm saying, driving young women to identify as trans because they're going through body changes, because they might be lonely and isolated, because it gives them a social step up to cling to, because it gives girls an identity to rally around. They're now part of the victim culture. We see that happening. And it's not just trans, by the way. I want to point that it's not just trans. It's also with other social contagions, such as women saying, for a long time, bulimia, right, has been a long time problem and concern with women on social media. The bizarre trend of girls on TikTok saying that they have Tourette's, and then all these young ladies all of a sudden are saying they've got Tourette's and are exhibiting tics when they don't, right? We're seeing the results in front of our eyes, right, of this mass push for trans activism, trans identitarianism, and that bleeds through to academia, how the kids are proselytized, right? These people are are basically being baptized into the waters of far left ideology, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory, and this transactivism, right? You see all of that come to a head in what happened with the Nashville shooter. This is a man who is identifying as a woman, and this book that he wrote, right? It was a notebook full of mad scribblings. Well, after this horrible act was perpetrated, the state, the powers that be, law enforcement, decided, well, we're not going to release it. And at the time, we were told a fantastic lie. The lie was that the families of the victims said that they did not want to have that released, that it was too sensitive for them, right? That's a complete lie. We now know. The families had never seen this diary of a mad trans woman. As I said, I refuse to call it a manifesto. That gives it too much credence. And I think that even mentioning the name of this person is giving it too much credit. I think it is part of what drives this for sure. Writing these books and intentionally having them be released after the act is giving these people more incentive to do it, right? Live on in infamy. So this diary of a mad trans woman has in it exactly what you would expect were you somebody looking at what's going on in our society. This is namely 3 pages that was released through Steven Crowder. I don't know why Steven Crowder is the guy who ends up releasing this stuff. I guess good job, Steven Crowder, being able to get this leaked information. And by the way, we know it's true because the forces that had been trying so desperately to keep it silent, for reasons I'll tell you about in just a second, had essentially said, well, we're going to investigate this. We're going to find out who leaked it. So, you know it's true. Just like when Hunter Biden, says, well, he didn't, it's not my laptop, and then sues over his laptop. So we know that this is true. Now, these 3 pages, I'm not going to read them verbatim, but I'll give you the gist of what they said. Essentially, what this screed was about was talking about how gleeful this madman was to go out and kill children because he said he wanted to essentially punish these blonde mop tops. He wanted to kill these little faggots, right? His words, not mine. I'm sure I'm going to get demonetized on YouTube for saying it, but I'm going to say it. And that he wanted to kill these privileged white children and people. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. Number one, let's start with the old FAG word. I'll refrain from saying it again in the hopes that we will not be more thoroughly stomped down than we are in listenership. And I've been told if you don't say these things early on, you don't get whacked. So many times, this has been, in a lot of, as we've seen, more honest reporting into how trans comes to be, and a lot of what happens in how people become trans is that a portion of the trans populace turns out to be gay. In fact, they found that some 80% of trans people, if they were simply left alone, when simply left alone, children that are confused, children that are non-binary, that are gender, have gender confusion, whatever it might be. I'm trying to think of the clinical term for it. I just can't bring it to mind because I'm tired from daylight savings time, which I'll bitch about in a minute. Many of these children, 80%, in fact, from the most recent studies, just simply turn out to be gay. If they are not inundated with hormones, if they are not gender affirmed, they turn out to be gay. Now, a portion of that turns out to be trans and that resists this and wants to be trans, well, some of that is in fact rooted in homophobia. We're actually seeing this concretely in that some of these people have been brought up in upbringings and have a concept in their minds where they don't want to be gay, and making this transition. In fact, now I don't have to be gay. Now I'm a woman, right? I'm a woman attracted to men. That's perfectly reasonable. My deep-seated hatred of homosexuality has been beaten. We did it, gang. That's why a lot of the gay community that objects to trans being lumped into this does view trans as an attack on the homosexual community, because they're viewing it as essentially an effort to be homophobic, to eliminate gay people from the spectrum, because now you're saying, well, you're not gay anymore. No one's gay anymore. You're just born into another body. There you go. Thank you, Facebook user, gender dysmorphia. Hello, Thirsty Dursty. Live viewers, check out the live streaming videos. So we're seeing that this is coming out in this screed. By calling these little kids the FAG word, well, the bags, right? By calling them bags, this person's laying it pretty clear that he's got some issues with homosexuals. Makes you wonder, okay, is he homosexual then? Is that why he identifies as trans? Is this why this deep-seated hatred is coming out here, calling them all words. Why that word? Why at this time? You're talking about little kids, calling little white kids baggots. Okay? So there's that aspect to think about. But again, we're told that this is not to be concerned about it. How can we ever question the transitioning of these people? The other aspect, of course, is specifically targeting white people. Now, every time we see anything that's about racial hatred, we're always told that it goes one way and one way only. That only minority folk, colored folk, they can only hate whitey and whitey. There's no possible chance that white people can hate white people, or that, we're told that white people can hate minorities and not the other way around, right? That there's no such thing as reverse racism. Well, you're seeing right here that this person who was white has been taught to hate white people and hate white privilege. Now, I'm on record. I've said before, I do believe white privilege exists. I'm not going to go into all the factors of that, but I do think it exists in the manner that people will look upon somebody that has white skin and be, let's say, more likely to lend them money, to trust them, they're not going to cross the street. Now, some of that is, in fact, passed down racism, right? Without a doubt. Some of that is pushed through by conditions that have been forced upon certain racial groups, aka the welfare state on the black populace, through government action, right? Which is also racism, and putting these people in the lower socioeconomic state, breaking up the family units by virtue of terrible laws, the war on drugs, you name it, right? So that lenders might say, well, I don't know if we're going to go this way. All right, so some of that exists for sure. But to see a white male who's identifying as trans, which is probably the most privileged class of person you can be in the goddamn world right now. Let's just lay it out plain. If you're a white man identifying as a woman, you now are able to violate the rights of women left, right, and center. You're able to violate their safe spaces. You're able to violate their sports spaces. You're able to take away their winnings. You're able to take away their scholarships. You're able to go to women's prisons and rape all you want, right? And the ACLU is going to protect your right to do that. And that's a true story, by the way. The ACLU is actually trying to protect men going to women's prisons because they identify as women. And how dare you, by the way, if there is a rapist or a murderer, how dare you misgender that person in your news reporting? So there's no more class of people that's more privileged than a white trans male at this point in time. Of course, they also happen to be very violent, as you're seeing right here. As you've seen with all the trans protests going on, where they violently will attack women in the streets, right? You're seeing these Antifa folk violently attack people. I'm getting on a tangent here. Returning to the main core. This is a person who has now been trained to hate white people because of their quote-unquote privilege. So while white privilege exists, to say that it somehow overrides all of our society, that systematic racism is so prevalent that somehow this is to blame, that people have to rise up and shoot white children, as this person clearly thought was a great idea. Well, that comes around to what we've been taught, by our mainstream media, right? The way they cover the news, the way that they seclude and push aside stories that don't go with the mainstream narrative, aka Whitey's the devil. The way that they suppress stories where mass shooters are of color, which, by the way, the latest 90%, not 9%, make it down stop. Many of the latest mass shooters have been people that are either black, Hispanic. They don't want to talk about those people, though. White shooters, that's the bread and butter. So we're seeing the way the media covers these things. We're seeing the way academia covers these things. We're seeing the way that academia pushes, as I said, critical race theory. DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, which every school district now has somebody heading up their DEI, has every curriculum, which you have to sue, literally, school districts to try to get a sample of the curriculum they're teaching. And they fight tooth and nail to stop you from getting them. They are inundated, these children, with anti-white propaganda, with anti-colonizer propaganda. So are we surprised to see when a kid that's grown up being taught this in this environment, nonstop, goes and does something this horrible and this heinous? Now, this, like anything, is an outliner. I'm not saying that this is going to happen all the time. Of course it's not. But the way these people clamp down on the information coming out from this mad, Diary of a Mad Trans Woman shows you where they're at. because it goes against everything that they're trying to tell you, because it proves that what's going on here in the schools with the media, with the trans activist movement is a problem. That we've got an issue here that goes beyond white privilege and into a whole lot shit deeper, like the isolation, as I said, like social media, like the way these kids are being taught to hate, factually taught to hate, and then dosed up with hormones and medications and told, this is your enemy. The proof here is pretty incontrovertible when you look at what's been done to stop this information from getting out. Now, some of the thing I want to go into too, while we're talking about censorship, while we're talking about information withholding and control, is that Jim Jordan today, very failed Speaker of the House candidate, Jim Jordan, he had done a thread talking about information that's been released. And essentially, this is information that formally backs up what the Twitter files had released, which you'll recall, Democrats went after former liberals, former Democrats of their own ranks, of course, Matt Taibbi, Michael Schellenberger, and others, for their reporting on the Twitter files. Barry Weiss, of course, isn't a former liberal, but they went after Taibbi and Schellenberger specifically, threatening them, questioning their journalistic integrity. You recall that Jim Jordan took actual action against the FBI, an investigation of the FBI, because the FBI had raided Matt Taibbi's house, coincidentally, during this hearing on government censorship, working with social media companies and working with, you guessed it, academia, to censor, remove Americans' tweets, Americans' Facebook posts, etc., YouTube videos from social media. And he just today had talked about how this report they've gotten is solidifying, confirming that in a governmental sense. Now, this is a report called The Weaponization of Disinformation, Pseudo-Experts and Bureaucrats, How the Federal Government Partnered with Universities to Censor Americans' Political Speech. And it's from the Committee on the Judiciary and the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. Now, unfortunately, I was going to try to read this entire report before I did this live stream and this podcast recording. For whatever reason, the link that they had posted to judicial.gov wasn't working, which it makes you suspicious in its own right? That the fact that the link to the report about government censorship, the link's down. What are the odds? So the link was down. It may have just crashed from too many people clicking on it, but it said file not found on the site for a good hour. Finally, I was able to get in there reviewing it, but I'll give you the short shrift of this. The Cliff's Notes is that the government, during the 2020 cycle, right, because there was all this nonsense about how our elections were going to be hacked and misinformation and their election interference, right? Remember all those bullshit terms that they threw out at us to convince us that Russia was hacking our elections? Remember all the lies that the Democrats told to scare you? Well, the government decided they were going to take formal action under this election integrity partnership or election integrity committee. What this was that CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Association, worked with the Department of State, the GEC. They partnered with Stanford Internet Observatory, which is one of the most nefarious, underhanded piece of shit organizations that's ever existed, is complicit in every single censorship application the federal government has gone through, by the way. They partnered with a couple of different organizations, which then passed through these demands for censorship to big tech. Now, it started under the guise, as I said, of election integrity. We're going to take down posts that are dangerous to our elections. Now, that, of course, is highly subjective. Depends on who's going to be in power. It depends on how they view a threat. And naturally, who defines truth? Like, this is something that I'm bringing into the Libertarian parties. I can't say the platform, right? Because I'm not working on changing the platform. But I'm bringing it into the messaging, bringing it into the core concept of how people understand what the Libertarian Party means and what it does, which is the constant war for truth. We are in a war versus our government right now. And that war is over the definition of truth and the definition of reality. I talked about it on the last show. But we're seeing it come to fruition here with this report showing how the government went out of its way to create a specific organization of public partnerships, right? The greatest evil known to humanity, to censor information, to track information, and to adjust people's perception of reality. How did they do this? Well, they worked and had this entire thing called a JIRA, JIRA ticket system, which I pulled a few up to share with you guys. They would work with these government organizations, work with Stanford and their little crony organizations to pull predominantly conservative viewpoints about misinformation, conservative, libertarian, anti-establishment viewpoints about election integrity, about drop boxes. Now, remember, this is during COVID, of course. This is an unprecedented change in our election systems because you had drop boxes everywhere, many of which, by the way, were unconstitutional and illegal. You had massive mail-in voting, which I'm sorry, is ripe for fraud and scandal. And it still is to this day. And if you're going to tell me there was no fraud during the election, I'll tell you to go fuck yourself. And I'll watch YouTube will pull me just for saying that. But we have the evidence to show this. You have ballot harvesting going on, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with ballot harvesting, it's where you go, you help old people and invalids and homeless fill out their ballots, right? People that usually wouldn't get out to vote. Well, you go and you help them fill the vote out, right? But I wonder if you're going to help them, all of these people who have been mailed ballots now that never requested them because everybody was, at least in California, I wonder which way they're going to vote if you're going to give them the ballot and really help them out. I wonder if they're even with it. These people that are drugged out in nursing homes, half of whom have Alzheimer's, half of whom are invalid, half of them are asleep when you get there. I wonder which way they're going to vote. And shockingly, they all voted one way. So anyway, if you dared to call that out, if you dared to question it, if you dared to post any sort of observation about the election, which went contrary to popular belief, they might flag you and remove you. They removed thousands and thousands and thousands of posts. Not just from famous people either, though there's a big list of famous people they removed posts from, but everyday folk as well. And you recall, by the way, let's not forget, and I'm forgetting the guy's name, let's not forget the government also just threw a man in jail for 6 years for posting a meme about being able to vote for Hillary Clinton from your couch, right? I believe it was the Hillary Clinton vote. A meme. They put him in jail for 6 years. That is psychotic, next level insanity. That's something that we have to protest against. It has to be fought against. I'm disgusted that you're not seeing more people within the government of representatives fight against it now. This is one of the reasons I'm recording this on voter day. And I'm sorry to those of you libertarians out there that think that, well, I'm just going to sit at home and whine and not vote. The system's rigged. You guys are selling. No, fuck you, moron. If you can change your circumstance, if you can put people into power, and by the way, I'm sorry to break it to you, we have a big power structure right here, and you whining about it's not going to change it. You have to do action. You have to vote for the people that are actually running to try to take the system down and change the system from the inside, or at least make it less aggressive. Or you can just sit there and get your tiny asshole fucked until it's raw and red. I'm going to go and try to do something. You can whine about it. Get out and vote if you're watching this right now. Vote for if you've got a libertarian you can vote for, go for it. If you've got a sane person out there you can vote for it. But anyway, so Jim Jordan has released this, and the violations here bled not only into the election integrity, but of course, during COVID, this election integrity committee, this partnership, founded under the guise of protecting our elections. Well, wow. What do you think happened, guys? Do you think that the government took an organization that was created for one thing, was given an inordinate and unconstitutional amount of power to oversee free speech, the definition of truth and thought in our nation? Do you think they stopped at their predestined statement of their mission statement, right, to protect elections? No, of fucking course not they did. Of course they didn't. No, they decided, well, now we've got to go on and fight COVID. We have to fight all the misinformation of COVID. So they censored everything on that. I'll read you a couple ones I pull up here. A TikTok video has several anti-vax conspiracies. Well, that had to be removed. An antibody-dependent enhancement as a side effect of a vaccine. That had to be removed. Video on Professor Dolores Cahill claiming people will start dying a few months after first mRNA vaccine, which, of course, we know happened factually in I would say, large portion of the population. We're talking tens of thousands of people now that have died from this. And including, I was just reading recently, the doctor, Peter McSomething or other. He was the doctor that came out. He's a cardiologist and had said strongly, "Hey, this is bad for you. Like this is causing heart issues. This is causing people to have myocarditis." He had just released some findings about people that had shots in pain where the shot was administered, right, which is a lot of people, having a much higher risk now for heart effects coming around later in life. And he showed this study in France where a lot of the French athletes had this happen. Dr. Peter McCullough. He, of course, had post-removes. An allegation that the CDC is underreporting deaths after vaccines got reported. All of these things, of course, were true. The government removed all of them. Now, a lot of you know this. I just bring this up because we have now the evidence. Plain and simple. We have evidence well beyond, and this is from Stanford, by the way. This is from the Evil Internet Observatory, the Death Star of government censorship. We have the records because under threat of congressional, what do they call it? My brain honestly is mush right now from this fucking daylight savings time. Under threat of denying Congress, defying Congress. Mental workaround here. They were subpoenaed and forced to turn over this information. So now, unlike the Twitter files where you were getting information, which some of it, you're getting emails from the FBI, from the NSA, from CISPA, this is going beyond that. This is going to the hub. Stanford was the hub between the government and the social media platforms. So you've got everything in here. So this is unbelievably damning, and it comes at a perfect time because, of course, the Supreme Court has also taken up Missouri versus Biden. And that means that they're going to have access to all of these records to show that this government overreached, censored, and as I said, attempted to define truth in the face of pure evidence to every bit of the contrary in order to poison Americans, in order to poison our minds, our bodies, and, of course, to enrich their own pockets through Big Pharma. So, anyway. That's that. Hey guys, while we're at the half point of the show, I want to ask you, please, if you have not, go support us on Patreon or on Locals. We are patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. You will get morning rants. I do them about every other day now. It's, with the kids getting to school, it's a little bit harder than it used to be. But about every other day, my Good Morning Fuckhead rants. You get a new secrets, lies, and cover-ups coming very soon. We are going to focus, I think, on the disappearance of the Malaysian flight that just nobody knows where it went. Well, there's a counter theory that the government done disappeared it. And it's pretty damn interesting. So I think we're going to get into that very soon. Of course, you get live streams. You'll get some bonus shows we do, like Degenerate Gamblers. It's football season. Rico, Odie, and I get together and we talk about our football picks. We talk about stories of woe that happened over the past week and just kind of bust each other's balls. That's all football season long. And, we roll out other stuff as it goes. So please support us. It makes a big difference, helps us to fund the show, helps us to travel and go to events and, do our rebrandings and T-shirts designs and all that stuff. Susan Gerhardt just says, hello. Susan, did you type in, are you trying to Google something? I can't wait to see what she types next. All right, guys, so let's get back into it. Next thing I want to talk about, right, where we're talking about the psychosis of a lot of people in this trans movement, especially, as I said, there's way more women, young women that are transitioning from, that are attempting to transition to the social contagion. But a lot of these males that are transitioning to these aggressive, isolated men who are taking advantage of the world around them, they seem to have a deep level of psychosis as well. Now, we don't know how many of these people are schizophrenic. We don't know how many are dealing with depression. The findings do show that a high percentage of people are autistic that happen to go down this trans route. Let me share this with you. This is from Libs of TikTok. You're probably familiar with this account, but I just couldn't get over it. This guy's at Disneyland or Disney World, and he's whining about a very specific thing. Let me just play this for you, and you can enjoy.
People want to say that I don't experience PMS symptoms, but I've been cramping incredibly bad all day, and at some point, my pain tolerance went away, and it started hurting incredibly bad for the last 2 hours. So much so that it made me go and throw up 3 times. So yeah, PMS symptoms are ruining my Disney trip. Ruining my Disney trip.
This guy, so PMS symptoms are ruining this man. He is a man. It's very obvious he's a man. He has a full beard, for Christ's sake. He's whining and leaning up against a trash can, whining about PMS symptoms. Now, I don't care how many hormones you have injected in your body, you don't have a uterus. If you don't have a uterus, you can't have menstruations, you can't have pre-menstruations, and you can't have PMS. Now, there is no way that you can say this person exists in reality, and at this point, he doesn't have some sort of mental illness. Because here's the rationale here for me, right? If you're talking about somebody who is in perfect belief that they're a woman, despite being a male, having male genitalia, right? And somebody's actually arguing, saying that this looks like a woman. This is not a woman. That is a man. This person has a mental deficiency or a mental illness because you've now convinced yourself, right? Just like with, let's say, Munchausen by proxy, right? Or your people that are hypochondriacs. This person's convinced himself that he can have PMS despite the fact that there's no possible scientific way that you can have PMS as a man. So this person is now beyond, they forced their body to go beyond the realm of what is scientifically possible, biologically possible, and because of the psychosomatic effects of the belief here, of the mindset here, is having menstrual cramps in his bowels to the point where he's throwing up, to the point where he has to record a video. And by the way, let's not forget this person's also recording this video, right? So this is not just an exercise in a mental illness and, as I said, this hypochondria, but it's also going down the, of course, now very prominent route of I'm an influencer. I must get attention for this. Now, how many women do you know that would record? How many real women do you know that would sit down in the middle of Disney World or Disneyland and record a video about their menstrual cramps? I don't know many. I'll tell you why. Because it's a psychotic thing to do. It's a cry for attention. It's a cry for absolute desperation, and it bleeds into everything that is at the core of these social influencer movements, of these people identifying as a different gender. And that comes down to, I want to be different. I want to be a victim. I want people to pay attention to me. I want to be treated as a special class. This person is probably one of the most uninteresting people you're ever going to meet. And yet, this is what we see happening. Complete psychosomatic effects, if they're even true, by the way. I don't even know if this guy's full of shit. He might just be making it up. I'm going to go to Disney World and pretend that I'm having period cramps and tell people that I threw up. Boy, I'm exhausted. I don't have time to shave my beard, but I'll make sure that they have tampons in the men's room for me. This is fucking lunacy. And this person is a perfect example of what is fucking going on here. It's just, God, it's ridiculous. And if you're not watching the video, please take a look at the video. I mean, there's no doubt, there's no question that this is a man. I'll play a little bit. I'll play one more time for you guys. You can judge for yourself.
People want to say that I don't experience PMS symptoms, but I've been cramping incredibly bad all day, and at some point, my pain tolerance went away, and it started hurting incredibly bad for the last 2 hours. So much so that it made me go and throw up 3 times. So yeah, PMS symptoms are ruining my Disney trip.
Ridiculous. He's ruining everybody else's Disney trip. That's what's happening here. He's ruining everybody else's Disney trip. Going in bathrooms, scaring children, vomiting with his beard over his period cramps, and then whining about it, sitting next to a trash can on the ground in public is ruining everybody else's Disney trip. God, it's ridiculous. All right, so next thing I want to talk about here, there's a new Army recruitment video out, and I don't know, this just kind of struck me as funny because there's indicators right now. People are worried about World War III. People are worried about the way in which this interaction between, obviously, Israel, the broader, nations in the Middle East. It seems like Russia, Ukraine's not going to be a thing anymore, although the United States, by the way, just did revoke or they just dropped out of an agreement. I can't remember the exact name of the agreement, but it just happened today. And essentially what it is they're removing any limitations on troop deployments. It's like an arms agreement with Russia, NATO, and the United States. Russia dropped out of it, and now the United States has dropped out of it. Hopefully we're not going to be deploying any troops over there. But there, of course, are rumblings. And, of course, you also have to look at certain indicators. I think I was talking with John Odermatt the other day about this. If oil goes up, if gold goes up, and there's one more indicator I think that we have to look for. If that goes up as well, we're going to war. But it's also interesting. I thought this is pretty funny as we're talking about, trans. We're talking about how the Army, of course, had put out all this woke recruitment videos. Well, you've also got, this is from a site called N Wokeness. You've got this new ad coming out, and their observation was that they dropped this new video with just straight white men, and that means they're going to war. Which I thought was a pretty funny observation. Stand up! No, it's not all straight white men, by the way, in this. They still have different races. But it is funny, right? You got mostly white guys jumping out of a plane. Woo! The greatest victories, it says, are never achieved alone. And it's got a bunch of paratroopers flying into a field. I'm sure to fight a war, be all you can be. I'm sure to fight a war that has nothing to do with any of us here, that will never impact us here at home, and which we're going to be spending billions and billions of dollars on, right? The Time Magazine, I think, just had an article come out recently talking about how Zelensky's desperately trying to keep the war going, how people aren't even obeying his commands now anymore, how the world support for that war has dried up, how it's unwinnable, and they've been trying to usher in a peace negotiations finally between Ukraine and Russia, which was obvious from the start. It was obvious from the start that Ukraine's not going to win this war. But you've got this video despite that. And it makes me worry. To end Wokeness's point, it makes me worry that they're focusing now instead on recruiting from the X, Y, and Z communities and trying to tell everybody that it's a happy-go-lucky place where they'll pay for your surgeries. Now it's back to regular old recruiting. It's pretty funny. Got to make you worry. All right, to wrap this up, guys. Sorry. So I was just reading some of the targets. The comments here in the quotes here. No, I'm not going to read the chat to read your spelling out Tower Gang fans. Just to wrap this up, daylight savings time just can suck a dick. I hate everything about it. I'm exhausted during this podcast. We voted on it. Remember, they brought it to I think the Senate passed it and the House rejected it, right? Why? What purpose does it serve anymore? What do we need it for? More people, when we lose an hour of sleep, more people get into car wrecks, more people have heart attacks, more people are calling out of work. It's a drain on the economy. It's a drain on our health. It's a drain on your sanity. I'll tell you this, even in the fallback, right? You're supposed to get an extra hour of sleep. Guess what? If you're a parent of young children, you're losing like 2 hours of sleep. Because not only are you staying up later, the kids still get tired. They still go to bed a little later. Maybe they go to bed a half an hour later. You're still staying up later to adjust to the time. And then those little sons of bitches are up at the crack of dawn. And now, guess what? 5 a.m. today, I'm awake. If you got stupid ass dogs that bark to get fed, they're awake. So now you're just double fucked. Why? I mean, why are we allowing this? Why are we permitting this to happen? Is there a place they keep time in the United States, like these fucking morons that think that January 6th was going to overthrow our democracy because they went into the Capitol building? Does the government keep time somewhere in a similar fashion? Can we send the shaman in to get our daylight? He's just sitting, he's stealing the daylight savings clock instead of the Pelosi podium. All right. That's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you for listening. Remember, subscribe to the Lions of Liberty Network. Go and hit that notification button on YouTube. We're on Rumble. Subscribe to the pod anywhere you're hearing it. And, of course, I will remind you to go, those of you that like the show, you can give us a nice little review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever it might be. We just love it. All right, guys, that's it. From me, Brian McWilliams from the Lions of Liberty Network and from Mean Age Daydream. Keep those electric eyes on me, babe, and keep that ray gun to my head.